So let's go ahead and get started. We have Arya today, who is my love, and she's going to talk to us about a couple different things. First, let's start off. Earlier this week, you had this conversation with a family member about the cranberries and how this person would not listen to the cranberries because why?
Yeah, so it's my dad. We can reveal that.
Okay.
We were playing this game, this texting game back and forth, like best one-hit wonders of the 1990s. So I was like, oh, the Cranberries, which is their best single. And he was like, I don't listen to the Cranberries, very direct. And I was like, yeah, why not? And he was like, when I listen to the Cranberries, somewhere like some far off feeling leaves me with my feelings hurt. And I'm
Mm,
like, okay, do you think of a particular person, a particular situation? And he says, no, it's just that it hurts his feelings somehow.
mm-hmm. And what was your I guess like inspiration from that, or like what did you take away from that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I would say that since I've been in therapy, um, the more things I'm feeling, mostly fear or anxiety, I there's something in my brain that feels satisfied when I feel them, as if I have felt them before, but I just didn't recognize them. I didn't have a name for it, right? And I don't mean that it was deep down in my soul or my heart or anything like that. I mean, there really is something in my mind that clicks, as if like it should have been working this entire time, but it wasn't, right? Now suddenly it is satisfied. And even though it's unpleasant to feel fear or anxiety or sadness listening to the Cranberries, now I do often, and I can recognize it as such. And it actually does feel soothing to my brain somehow.
To actually feel the feelings, to like recognize them and experience them.
Yes, I mean, initially it felt a little bit like I was cursed, right? Like for instance, my dad will be, he said he's never going to listen to the Cranberries of his own volition, right? So I kept thinking to myself, oh, what are these painful things going to be for me? That like I will not listen to it because it's too painful. Or I won't watch this because it's too painful, etc. But now I'm a little bit different than my dad in that I would still do all of these things. I would. I would be able to confront, whatever made me feel fear or anxiety or all of the above, because it's a lot better than just feeling mostly neutral about everything.
Yeah. People used to ask me, like I guess maybe 10, 10, 11, 12 years ago, they used to ask me, and feel free to like, uh, yeah, say what you're thinking about this in the chats and stuff, and we can unmute
Mm-hmm.
people too. But people used to ask me, if you could be different, if you could be like less psychopathic, would you? And I used to always say yes, because I've lived a life, at the time, 30 some odd years or something of being a particular way, and I thought, why not just try something different? And how do you feel about that?
Yes, I mean, if I were able to change, right, snap my fingers and change, I would, just to have the experience.
Right.
I'm already bored of my own sociopathy. That I would try something different for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a few decades is nice. I wish that everybody else could have an
I've
experience of
definitely
a
gotten a feel
few,
for it.
yeah, a few decades of like what it is like to be kind of personality disordered in this specific way. So when you told me
Yes.
this thing about the cranberries, I was like, this reminds me a lot of like how I used to feel emotions too, which is like I think you kind of described it at the time of it's like the emotions in another room or like another wing of the
Oh,
house or something.
yes.
Like you can
Yes.
kind of like almost like a little bit sense that it's there or whatever, but it's so far
Yes,
away.
you know that it exists,
Yes.
and it is tangible, but it just seems like I can't just reach it whenever I want, right?
Right.
You
And you're
know?
not even sure kind of why it's there, you know?
Right,
It has
right.
like no
Yes.
context. And that's why I liked your dad's comment about it so much, where he was like, listening to the cranberries hurts my feelings, but I don't know
Yes.
why. There's no real reason behind it. So kind of like also like this description of like not quite being in touch with what the feeling is, but you know that you're
Right.
experiencing something and it kind of feels bad. That's basically how it used to be to have kind of like psychopathic emotions. You know, every once in a while, you know, you'd get a stronger emotion, or you'd have a moment of clarity or something, or it would be like a little bit more clear why you were having the emotion, at least for me. But for the most part, it was like, I think I described it once as it's like reading a book, you know, like this is what it means to kind of have like contextless emotions. It's like reading a book backwards, page by page. So there's some some
Oh
ability
yes, I
to
love
kind of
spoilers.
understand. Yeah. And then
Yes,
or like
I don't care
the,
about the context.
yeah, the movie Memento or something, where it's like,
Yeah.
okay, like you have, it's not like zero context, it just is like, you know, you just don't, you don't kind of feel it to the same degree, I think, and you're not aware of it to the same degree, and it doesn't
Hmm.
mean uh I think what it means to other people to be experiencing that particular emotion. But
Yeah, I
let's,
mean, from
oh, go ahead.
I think for my dad, it would be like opening Pandora's box. You know, he does not want to solve for X in this situation. Why does this hurt my feelings so badly? I think I am still fearless enough that I would be like, yes, just open the door, you know, open the box. Whatever's inside is fine, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, and I wonder too. I kind of think maybe it's, I'm that way with my own emotions too. They feel bad sometimes, or sometimes they feel good, but I'm still kind of in that, well, let's just try, you know, like it reminds
Yes.
me, we went to Disney World and Universal in Florida, and I was eating those Birdie Bott's every flavor bean jelly beans. And you were like horrified because I didn't like sort out all the vomit ones. So I'm just sitting there eating them. And I was like, oh, another vomit one. And you're like, well, like, look what they look like.
There
And
are picture
stop,
descriptions. You know, this isn't just like a crapshoot, you know?
stop eating them. But I feel like with my own emotions, I'm like the Birdie Bot still. I'm just like, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
I'll just keep eating these beans as my little fingers find them, no matter if they're vomit or not. Because even vomit's kind
Right.
of an interesting flavor. And it honestly, the vomit, I feel like if you just eat vomit, yeah, it's a bad taste or whatever. But if you know it's vomit and put it in your mouth, for some reason it tastes worse, you know? Like if you just accidentally taste vomit, then it's more like, is this vomit or is it also maybe sausage? Like it's, you taste the sugar more, I think, when you realize it's not, or you don't know that it's vomit. And so I kind of like
Yeah.
that too with my emotions. I'm like, this is fine, you know, like people that I love will move halfway around the world from me. Okay, this is fine. Let me just
Hmm.
experience these things. And it is true, I'm way
Yeah.
less haunted by it than I used to be, you know, like the only
Yes,
emotions,
absolutely.
yes, the only emotions that I'm still haunted by, emotional experiences, are ones that are at least 3 years old. Like anything that's happened in the past 3 years, and there've been plenty of like, you know, kind of slightly haunting things, you know, I just experienced the
Definitely.
emotion freely and then it was gone. You know, the only things that I still kind of am like, oh, think about at night as I'm going to sleep type haunting is, you know, stuff that's like older than like 4 or 5 years or something. You know, so I think that
Yes.
also, at least for me, is like really good anecdotal evidence of like, you know, what does it mean to just experience these feelings freely and fully in the moment versus like not. So yeah, it's interesting. Even when I was like
Yeah.
my most psychopathic, every once in a while I would be haunted by kind of a sense of something, you know, like, oh, you know,
Yeah, the
I
same
can't
thing
go
happened to
back
me.
there.
Yes, I cannot go back to
Hmm.
fill in the blank city, bar, restaurant. I can't go back there, you know? I've been
Yeah,
arrested there or something, you know?
yeah, there's, or you like, you know, lost a friendship or a relationship or something. There's something
Yes.
there that your body or somewhere in your mind knows was painful and does not
Yes.
want to go there. So that's what I think of when your dad says that thing about the cranberries, is it probably reminds him of something kind of like that. And then
Yes.
the answer to not having those sorts of things is to be as much as you can. And I honestly don't know that I would have been able to do it without like professional help, but to be able to like recognize, acknowledge in your own self your own emotions, and then just, you know, be willing to go ahead and experience them in that moment, even if they are the vomit flavor.
Right. Uh-huh. Even if it hurts your feelings.
Yeah, dang it.
Yeah.
All right, so here's a question from Paula. She says, hi Emmy, have you seen the film Parasite? There are a lot of psychopathic behaviors in that movie. Psychopathy is useful to cover some flaws, but sometimes it's hard to wear the mask all the time. So yes, I have seen the movie Parasite. It's a great film. You
Yeah,
have seen
it
it
is
too, right?
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
think we went together.
yeah, I think some people are kind of like it's it's just capitalism is like the terrible thing here. I actually think that that is like really eschewing proper personal responsibility in your own choices. To just kind of blame it all on capitalism and say the reason why I'm feeling this way is capitalism, it actually kind of reminds me of the SNL, the Dave Chappelle monologue that he gave. I think it was a week from yesterday. So
Mhm.
not this most recent one, but the one before. And it was really long, like 18, 20 minutes. And he kind of talks about how like some people feel bad and they feel powerless. Speaking of feeling our feelings, right? They have these bad feelings and they don't like it. They don't like it so much that they turn on each other and they're kind of like, you're the reason
Yes.
why I feel this way. You know, Democrats are the way or reason why, or Republicans, you know, probably even our international listeners are going to be able to understand. I think the last election made world news. so, so Dave Chappelle saying this, it's really good. I really recommend watching it in its entirety. And he says, Dave Chappelle's like, you know what? I feel these feelings too, but I don't,
Mhm.
unlike white people, he says, I don't turn to somebody else and blame them for that feeling.
Yeah, I
You know,
don't hate anyone.
yeah, I don't hate anyone, as he said, like kind of like this is just part of life or whatever, you know, and if you
Mhm.
haven't experienced this before in your life, great. You know, that's great that your life has been so privileged that this is the first time that you're like experiencing these, you know, thoughts that people are against you or you're a little bit powerless or you're a little bit disenfranchised. The world or your government or society doesn't look kind of like you want it to be. You know, you have these kind of like this rub from like your life. He's like, you know, but then he says, you know, the good thing about black people is they've lived their life this way for a long time, you know, and so they've learned to find joy even in that circumstance, even though
And
their
learn to
society,
forgive.
yes, and learned not to hate and not to be angry all the time and these different things. And he's so he was kind of like, you know, he uses the N word, but he's like, if you still feel this way, you know, just come get your black people lessons. Black people can teach you how to live in a society that does not necessarily reflect the way that you feel inside, but still be happy and content with what's going on. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's what I think about Parasite with the capitalism thing. It's like I'm like, you know, to kind of say it's capitalism is like not really taking responsibility for the fact that you can still feel okay in any given situation. Of course, Parasite takes it to the
Right.
extreme. You know, some of those situations are truly terrible, but and we can feel badly for the people. But anyways, so the second question though, psychopathy is useful to cover some flaws, but sometimes it's hard to wear the mask all the time. And I think that's really the thing for me. It was not just hard. I just lost interest in doing it. I was like,
Mm.
I don't really
For
have
me,
an
it would just be
interest.
exhausting.
Yeah.
Exhausting, you
Exhausting.
know?
Yeah. But it's not like I couldn't, you know, I probably could keep doing it or something or
Absolutely. Yeah.
get a little bit more efficient. But the more difficult it got, I think the more I kind of like self-reflected and thought, how interested am I in doing this? I mean, I almost feel like a dropout, you know, like I went to business school or
Yeah.
something and then dropped out, or medical school or something, where I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm cool being a nurse instead of a doctor or whatever, you know?
I often felt like a more greater propensity to lash out at
Mhm.
people. Some of the more hurtful things that I said to someone, I think has been I've spent one, too much time with them. Two, I'm not myself, right?
Yeah.
I'm whoever that week, you know, a nerd or something. But and then eventually I would get sick of it, you know, sick of their presence. I would want to be alone. So I would just be like, you know, you mean nothing to me. So just leave my apartment, you know, and
Yeah.
it's like we're talking about movies or something, you know, and just something comes out like this. And I'm like, well, now I can understand why these people are like, I don't want to spend time with you. You know, you say these shitty things all the time, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, you don't say them all the time. And this is, you have a word for this, people sickness. And it's kind of like
Yeah.
altitude sickness. It's like, you know, just like a general malaise or whatever. And it is true. Like the more you kind of engage with people in a certain way, particularly a fake way, the more you are likely to experience people sickness. And if you get people
Yes.
sick to a certain extent, then you are much more likely to not kind of wear the mask or do this kind of like masking behavior. You're much more likely to kind of lash out because you're not feeling well. You're not feeling well at all.
Right. Right. Exactly.
And once you get the kind of people sickness, it's kind of, oh, like motion sickness. It's like motion sickness in the sense that it's
Yes.
like, it's over, you know.
You have to write it out.
Yeah. You cannot
It's like
stop.
the stomach flu.
Yeah. You cannot just stop that moment. Just even if you were like on solid land, no, you're still motion sick. You know, you're still going to be motion sick for the next few hours until you can kind of just
it's still absolutely going to require 24 hours of silence.
Yes.
You know, and solitude.
And it's
for me
interesting
to feel better.
Yes, because, you know, speaking of kind of like weird parallels to like autism spectrum disorder, you know, I don't think I've ever said this, but to everybody else, you know this, that I sleep like almost in a, what would we say, like sensory deprivation sort of way. Like I have a sleep mask, I wear earplugs, you know.
We should get you a tank to sleep in.
A tank. I would love to sleep in the sensory deprivation things. But part of it is, you know, like to not disrupt my sleep. But even if I'm just relaxing, often I put that stuff on because I just like the sensory overload itself is kind of something that can kind of lead to an overstimulation of my brain. So I think, you know, the people sickness is not like a misanthropic thing. It's not that it's like the fact that they're people that is making you sick. It's the fact that
absolutely not.
Yeah. It's the fact
I will eventually miss those people.
Yes, you will, you know, and you'll be sad about the things that you said to them while you were people sick. Yeah. And kind of like, I'm very sorry, you know, you'll eat crow, you don't care how much crow you have to eat. Because you know that you were bad, you know, you said things that you shouldn't have, but it's just, it was not.
Yeah, I understand when people are crying, I've upset them.
Yes, but at that point in your people sickness, it was not possible really for you to do otherwise. You know, like the decisions. No. It's kind of like when you're in a skid on the highway in snow, it's not possible.
Good example.
Stop then, you know, like maybe.
In fact, putting on the brakes is worse.
Yes, exactly. Right. So when people are sometimes like, oh, you're responsible for your actions, it's like, yes and no, you know, because yes, you were responsible for getting to that point of people sickness. But no, once you're in the people sickness, then it really is a degree less of responsibility. You have less control. That's what I mean. You know, and since you have less control, then I feel like you are a little bit less responsible. I
have tried to get better at warning people.
Yes.
You know, I want to be alone. I need an hour alone. Or I used to run a business, and when I put my headphones in, I would put my AirPods in, they would know I did not want to be talked to. You know, it could wait until I take them out. And then, you know, they could address me with questions or whatever. But I kind of told them I had a team meeting, and I said, guys, you know, I need time to think, and I need time to be alone, you know? So occasionally I'll have my headphones in, and I don't want anyone to speak to me.
Which is really good.
I still do that.
Yeah. Emotional etiquette. Yeah. You know, to be
sounds
like
really autistic, people. But yes.
Yeah. You know, speaking of kind of like, I don't even think this is an autism trait, but I think it's kind of a good illustration of like how much more kind of energy is being spent in normal interactions versus not. Like a lot of people watch TV passively. I cannot watch television passively, not any sort of audio visual anything. Like there's only actually some.
I can hardly watch television.
Yes. Yeah, you're really bad about that. In fact, when we first met, you said that. And so like when you and I watch television, it's always subtitles. It's always like, you know, like let's take out all light or other stimulation. It's like we have to focus so hard on what's happening on the television.
But then suddenly I need to check my phone. I need something to drink. We need to rewind it 15 seconds. That's something you do a lot where you're like, I didn't hear that, so let's go back.
And it's just so kind of like, it's not a passive thing. And I think for a lot of people, like it's just a good analogy. Like for us, television, movie watching is not a passive thing. You know, maybe for other psychopaths, I'm not saying it is for everybody, but that just is like a weird similarity there. And for other people, probably, you know, like engaging with other people is more of a passive thing, you know, but for us, it's not. It's like, okay, subtitles, here we go, my entire attention.
Would you say music is passive for you?
Oh, hardly ever, you know, and you're kind of this way too. You'll be like, I can't listen to music with words, you know, like while we're driving in the car.
Oh, yes.
And then we
have especially when I'm sick. People sick, sorry.
Yeah, people sick. Yes. So that's why I think there's like a connection because like the energy that's like required to kind of engage in these cultural things, because music, you know, music is like in some ways a personal engagement, right? With the people that made the music, with the people that wrote the music. Like as I'm listening to it, I'm thinking all these
Yes,
things.
but I do like background music. You know, I can't
Well,
tell if that's a passive thing or not.
but I can only have certain types of background music, often music that
Oh,
I'm
fair.
super
Yeah.
familiar with. If it's new music, I can almost never have it as background music unless it has to be like mindless, you know, like if there's kind of thought behind it, if there's like a creative
hmm
process, then it's too distracting. You know, it like engages
Okay.
me. Same thing, I can't ever have a conversation with a TV on in the background. I cannot. It's really hard for me to even be at restaurants and have music on in the
You are
background
terrible at it.
and still
Yes.
understand people. It has to be a certain
hmm
type of music, or either I'm very familiar with it, and that's kind of like driving, you know, like if you're very familiar with the route that you're driving, you're focused less on it, right? So I have to be
Right.
super familiar with the music, or it has to be like basically like the most garbage music that has no creative thought behind it. Otherwise, I'll be
hmm
like, you know, my attention just has like a hard time, you
For
know.
me in restaurants, you know, restaurants are always playing sports games, right?
Yeah.
Which I do love to watch football. I will become so enraptured in the game, even if it's not a team I care about, right?
I
Who
know.
cares?
Yeah, you just
That
have
it's
to, you're staring at
I've
it.
had
You're
my
like,
friends tell me before, like, hey, you're not here. You know,
uh-huh.
you're not here. You couldn't repeat what I just told you,
Oh,
you know, and I'm
absolutely
like,
not.
true, I
No
could not.
way. Yeah. And I'm like, that's your kind of fault for choosing to go to these places, you know? Like if you want to have a
Yes.
conversation with me, silence is the best, you know, silence, and there we're like, you know, there's nothing stimulating. It's interesting because I saw a comedian last night, and he's a famous dude, and he said he made a comment because people were kind of walking in and out, you know, the servers or whatever else, and he said this. He's to one person. He's like, "Oh, I can see that you're all like focused on the guy trying to relight the heater, you know."
Oh yeah.
And he's
Uh-huh.
like,
Yeah, I
unfortunately, I
felt
was
that.
trying to give you 2 minutes of exposition in order for you to understand this joke. And since you were all distracted by that, then you're going to give me a B+ response to this joke because you only kind of understood a little bit, you know. So he was
Right.
kind of admitting, you know, like as a comedian, he manipulates people, right? And he kind of gets them like
Absolutely. Yes.
enraptured, you know, gets them all caught up in the timing, the pacing, you know, leads them to this particular expectation of what the joke's going to be, and then the punchline, you know. And he
Yeah.
basically was like, since you guys weren't completely focused on me during this whole time, then the punchline wasn't as effective on you, you know. And I thought, I was
Right.
like, yeah, I was the whole time staring at the guy trying to light the heater, you know.
Yeah. Is
And
comedy hard for you to pay attention to?
it is kind of hard. I wish that
Yeah.
there were subtitles. It has to be very loud too. And if there's anybody talking
Yes, if it's
around
very
me,
loud.
then it's like I can't pay attention. But I think other people
Yes,
seem
I was
to be
definitely one of
too.
those people that sat in the front row in college.
Oh yeah, in
Otherwise,
law
it was
school,
like I was lost.
yes, there was one class. I didn't realize this. Law school, you sit in the seat that you're going to sit in the rest of the term, the very first day, right? And so then you sign a seating chart, and that's where you sit in forever after, right? And so I showed
Mhm.
up kind of not even late, but like 5 minutes before one of my classes. I think it was my very first class. And then I ended up having to sit
Mhm.
next to this dude who's actually my very good friend now. But he was so quirky, and he was so distracting with his weird quirkiness at the time. And I was like, I cannot understand anything that's going on in this class. And it actually was one of my worst grades in that class. And then I was like, you know
Yeah.
what? I can't stand to have like anybody else in my field of vision. I need to sit in the very front row directly in front of the teacher. Some people don't like that. In fact, I think a lot of people do. But every time I go in some sort of speaking environment, it's like front row,
I think
front and
people
center.
feel more vulnerable in the front row. This is something my friends have told me where we would take a college class together. I would be like,
Huh.
oh, sit with me up front. I have to sit up front, you know? And they would be like, no, you know, it would give them a certain sense of vulnerability that it
Yeah,
didn't give me, or they were going to get cold called or something, right?
yeah,
And they wouldn't like that either. Except I never felt like that happened to me. You know, it seemed like it was make believe.
yeah. Or even if they did cold call you, for me, it's like it's worth it. You know, so for like the comedian
Yeah.
last night, I was like, I want to sit, but I have been in the situation before where if you're in the very front row, why? The comedian always talks about you. So I was like, well, maybe I'll just sit in the second or third row for the comedian. Yeah, just
hmm
because of that. But yeah, normally the first row. But so we've been talking, this has been great and super interesting. And thank you for your question, Paula. And then, but let's talk about Maura Murray, right? Because you're into true crime. And this is a kind of a true crime story in which it's like a missing person. And the kind of interesting thing though about this particular missing person is that I think you're pretty sure, and it sounds like it to me too, that she was kind of on the psychopath spectrum, you know, pretty high. And so let's first talk about like the overall story. Let's talk about how she went missing, and then let's talk about why you think she's a psychopath.
Okay. Quick context. So Maura Murray was a 21-year-old nursing student, I believe at University of Massachusetts Amherst. February 9th, 2004, she emptied her bank account, packed everything in her dorm, and left. She
packed the stuff in her dorm, but it was just in boxes.
Oh, yes, but it was just in boxes. She didn't bring it with her, you know. She bought more than enough alcohol, maybe for a couple of days, right? And I believe she printed out something on MapQuest. Does anybody remember MapQuest? And she was trying to get a cabin in the mountains, they think, right? These New Hampshire mountain range, right? And so she left, she started drinking and driving. And I'm from the Midwest where everyone has a DUI at one point in time. It's like their entry into adulthood. And I believe she spun out and then hit the front end of her car on a guardrail, right? And this bus driver stops, asks her, hey, I will get you help. I will call the police. She says, oh, I've already called the police and I've called AAA. I'm fine. Little did she know that the bus driver was like, no one has cell phone reception here. You know, you have to have Wi-Fi or whatever. So he knew she was lying. And he was like, I'm going to go up to my house and call the police for you. And I will be back here with my wife, right? To wait with you.
It's kind of a weird thing to lie about, that I've already called the police, but of course she's drunk by this
Unless you're drinking and driving, yeah.
Yeah, and this is her third or fourth or fifth or something DUI, right?
Yeah, something, you know, even something that for a Midwesterner is unimaginable, but yeah. So anyways, he places a phone call to the police at like 7:43 p.m. The police arrive at 7:46. She's gone. And I believe to this date, there's been no credible sighting. They haven't found her backpack, her credit cards, her phone, her remains, and nothing, right? So of course, it's been conspiracy theories have been born of this. I personally think she succumbed to the elements, right? But yeah, but then, you have a different opinion.
Yeah, that's been your theory kind of this whole time, but then you just learned recently that she has a backpack and it was made out of material that you wouldn't expect to kind of like, you know, biodegrade in that time period.
Yeah.
And they've never found the backpack, and the backpack had all her, like her passport. And, but isn't the weirdest part is, didn't she like apply or get a false social security card or something ahead of time?
She did a couple weeks before she went missing. Maura Murray's kind of comes and goes in my life, just like every other obsession that I have, right? And this guy I was dating introduced me to this case, and we were hanging out, and I start with a Wikipedia page and wherever, you know, end up down a rabbit hole. And I kindly asked him to leave because I was like, I recognize so much of myself in this person, right? And at this point, I really wasn't interested in true crime at all. I mean, I like the violent aspect of it. You know, I was always like, show me the most gruesome, the worst, show me the videos, right?
Well, you used to watch like snuff videos too, right?
Yeah, I did. Yes, I was kind of a snuff video connoisseur for a while. But
I'm still like a little bit, well, I follow like all these medical surgery sites, so maybe there's something to that. But I'm still like a little bit horrified, a little bit haunted by that American Horror Story backstory for one of the characters, where she was part of a snuff video, and that's why she's a double amputee, is because...
Oh, yes, Jessica Lange, right?
Yes, yes. I was like, that was such a great backstory for her to be she's in Berlin, post-war Berlin, and they're making snuff videos. Jeez.
Have you seen Hostel?
No.
Seen the movie Hostel?
No.
Okay, it's very similar to that, but
spoiler alert.
Yeah, sorry guys. I always watch the endings of things and then I work my way back if I'm still interested, so maybe you guys still will. Anyways, yeah, so I recognized a lot of myself in Maura. Now at the time, I would not have described myself as sociopathic. I would have described myself as cold but naive, you know. And similar.
What do you mean by naive? That's kind of like an interesting way to describe yourself.
Well, I'll give you a Maura Murray example to illustrate this. So she originally went to West Point, right? And if anybody knows West Point, it's incredibly hard to get into. You almost sign up for the military for the rest of your life, right? And Maura decides to do this for whatever reason. I have actually been personally recruited by the military way more often than any of my friends. So maybe there's a connection there. But anyway, so she does end up at West Point with her sister. And, you know, she has money, she has a job, her family is like mildly well off. And she decides to steal the credit card of her roommate, right? And I'm thinking, yes, you know, I used to be like a little bit of a klepto, especially when it came to money. But, you know, this kind of didn't make sense to me, right? Because anybody can trace a credit card, right? But even worse, she decides to just purchase pizza with the card. You know, it's
That's
not
the
as
only
if
thing
she
she
was,
does. Yeah, she like gets
yes,
the
it's
credit
not
card.
what I would have done, like buy a bunch of like electronics on your card and then resell them, right?
Yeah,
For the
the
cash,
$20 pizza,
right?
which is getting shipped or delivered to your own residence.
Yes, yes, and she gave them her name,
Dang it.
right? Yes. So she just orders food, right? And anyone else might think, you know, was she starving? You know, did she make this like choice out of, you know, desperation? But there's just simply no way. You know, she had plenty of money. I mean, she worked the entire time she was in school,
And
and
she's not
her family.
stupid. She's at West
She's
Point.
yeah, she's at West Point, and I think she was a chemical engineering student at West Point. So she's not stupid either, right? That's very similar to me in college, you know. But yeah, so she steals a credit card, and then of course she gets kicked out of West Point for stealing someone's credit card, right? And I was just telling you this the other night about her. You know, why wouldn't she have just asked her friend, right? Like, hey, I don't have money, I'm starving, can you please order me a pizza? I guess, right? But that's kind of what I mean about the being naive, right? Is it just very similar to the bar story I told you, Emmy, when I got fired from the bar.
Oh, this is a good story. Tell these people. I don't think you've said it yet.
Okay. Yeah, so this is a good example of just being cold yet naive. So I get hired at this bar around my college campus. And when I was in college and early adulthood, money was my biggest motivator. You know, I wanted money. You know, I would do anything for it, basically. And so I'm working at this bar, and I'd been a server at, you know, a million different places at that point. But at this particular bar, you know, I was kind of on the bottom of the totem pole, you know, because everybody else had been there for several years. So I kind of got this crappy section. I was like, really? I only have these 2 tables. And, you know, this, my skill level is better than this. You know, I can handle this whole restaurant alone. Anyway, kind of forgetting the details about this. I mean, if you can help me, if you remember any of it.
So didn't they have, like, rather than put your tips in your aprons?
Yes, we pooled tips. Yes. Okay, so we pooled tips there, and that means every tip that you make is going to go and basically into a big pot, right? And we're going to split it evenly at the end of the night. It's supposed to reinforce teamwork and team morale, and everybody's working for everybody's customers. You're not just paying attention to your own, but you care about everyone else's, right? I didn't appreciate pulling tips, right? Especially when I felt like I had better personality skills and serving skills than most of the people that work there. You know, I was kind of like, you know, they're like dead weight to me, you know, because I could still make more money. So, yes, so we pulled tips. And then can you help me a little bit along here?
Didn't they put like the, it's funny you don't remember this now. Didn't they put the tips like in a physical location, like a jar? And then you were just like blatantly stealing tips out of this jar the whole time. And it's like really obvious to everyone that the new person, you know, like, where did all of our tips go? Is it quite possibly the person who this is her very first night serving?
Yeah, well, I did make it to the next night because they didn't want to totally put the blame on me. But the entire staff had known each other for years. And, you know, from them firing me anyways, they're like, we haven't had money problems, blah, 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 until you showed up on the scene. And I'm like, okay, you
Well, it
know?
was totally
But yes,
true. I mean, stupid for you to think that, you know, you could just like slide
yes.
right in and there's only what, like 6 other servers or something. It's not like there's a million and you'll just go unnoticed in the sheer numbers of the
Right.
thing.
But the thing about it, I was in between jobs at that point, right? So I was kind of like, I want to go out tonight. What am I going to do about this jar? Right.
Mm,
And sticky fingers, right? I
yeah.
mean, I wouldn't do that now. But at the time it seemed perfectly acceptable because I was like, I am a better server than the rest
Yeah.
of these girls. You know, who cares about the rest of these girls? Um, and it didn't it didn't make any sense, right? They have cameras, right?
Yeah.
This jar is pretty blatant behind the bar. I mean, they could just see me waltz behind the bar. I'm not the
They can,
bartender. There's no reason for me to be there, and just stick my hand in the jar. You
yeah.
know? I'm
Very
not putting
naive.
money in there,
Yeah, I
right?
can see what you mean. So we have like 3 minutes. Let's
Oh boy.
so a couple other things I think about with Maura Murray is, you
Yeah,
know,
go ahead.
like psychopaths, we have a tendency not to learn from experience, right? Sometimes I get
Mm.
that with you, you know, so, sometimes you'll do something and I'll be like, okay, that's the first time this painful thing has happened. Just some little mistake, forgotten something. Then the second
Yeah.
time it happens, I'm like, dang it. All right. Will she learn? The third time it happens, I'm like, okay, I can see what's happening, that she has not learned not to do this yet.
Yes.
But same thing with Maura Murray. I mean, that's how she was with like her drinking and driving. And here's
Yeah. In
why
the
I
span of
think
2 weeks, she totaled 2 cars drunk,
two
and then
weeks. And her
wrecked
dad was
another
just like,
car.
yeah, here's another car. I guess you can use my car now. Okay, now I'll buy you this beater car, right? So like, I guess 2 weeks
And
she
she
wrecked
wrecked all
three
3 of them.
cars. Yeah, all three of
Yes.
them. You know, all drunk driving. You know, she probably had like by this time an alcohol addiction. But the thing that really makes me think that she didn't just kind of die in the woods. Number one is she sounds like one of us, right? Number
Uh-huh.
two is she got the social security number. Number three is that like in that locale there was somebody who at that time they were like not sure if the person was going to survive, so possibly she would have killed somebody, you know, like a
Oh, yeah.
pedestrian. And people think
Yeah,
that
yeah,
what
yeah.
happened is that she heard about this car
They
accident.
speculate.
Yeah, they speculate that she heard about the car accident and that it caused like the death of somebody, and that she knew that that was very likely her from whatever the details were. So she was, I think she was kind of thinking, you know, the jig is up, the cops are going
Yes.
to come get me, and I'm going to be charged forever for at least manslaughter, drunk driving. You know, I'm going to be in prison for the next couple decades. And she's going up to
Right.
a cabin in New Hampshire or whatever, driving up north. Like it sounds like she's going to Canada. And actually there are, you know, there have been a bunch of sightings of her, supposed sightings of her in Canada.
Right.
So for me, I'm like, it's very clear what happened here. You know, she got the social security number, a fake social security number of a different name. She's gone up to Canada because she thinks that she killed somebody. But we
Right.
now
Yeah.
just have 30 seconds. Do you have anything else to say about Maura Murray? Maura Murray, if you're out there, we have no judgment. No judgment for you at all. And I don't think you did hit that person. So go ahead and show yourself.
I don't think she hit him either. You
Yeah.
know?
And
No.
even if she did, people make mistakes, and she just
Even if she
needed.
did, she just has an alcohol problem. It's okay, Maura.
Yes, it's okay. She just needed that fourth or fifth time to do it. All right, everybody.
Yeah,
That's it
absolutely.
for this week. We'll see you next week. Thank you all for showing up, and we'll talk to you soon.